The Count Bethune de Rosny, Prime Minister to Louis XVI of France. Now we're rounding Rosny Point, heading up into what they call Kangaroo Bay. Grey on the rocks, we have a lake and a grey and orange one around the coast. Quite vivid colours in that, bright yellow, orange and green. In the early days they were scraping off the rocks, all up in the pots. That's how they made the dyes for their clothing. These rocks are Jurassic dolerite, 170 million years old. Mount Wellington's a prime example of Jurassic dolerite. The only place you'll see large exposure of this stone here and Antarctica. Now on the other side of the bay is Kangaroo Bluff in the suburb of Bellerive, settled in 1812. Used to have hunting lodges where they came across to hunt wild game. Charles Darwin witnessed the death of a Tasmanian thylacine or tiger here on the bluff in 1836 on his round-the-world voyage on the Beagle. They were shot to extinction by the farmers for taking the sheep. The government put a bounty on the head, £1 for the adult tiger, 10 shillings for the pups. They've been trying to claim one in Sydney and Melbourne for the last 12 years. Spent about $14 million so far, yet to succeed. They've compared the skull of the Tasmanian tiger with the European grey wolf. Reckon they're virtually identical. They don't DNA match, so the Tasmanian tiger was a marsupial, now claiming 60 million years ago, one of the same. However, University in Queensland have studied the brain of the thylacine, which had been preserved in the museum in Munich. Said it's nothing like the European grey wolf. It's very similar to the Tasmanian devil. University of Melbourne have just been bequeathed another $5 million to continue on with that cloning process, and they're claiming in 8 years they'll have one cloned and walking around. They also shot the Tasmanian emu to extinction, smaller species than the mainland one. One time considered for Hobart over here in early days. Biggest problem, lack of fresh water. On the shore here we have a water treatment plant. The good news about that, it no longer goes into the river. They pump it to Richmond to water the golf courses. And when the bridge was down, this was the main bay. They ran the ferry services to Hobart. There were 14 ferries operating out of the bay at one time, and over the 2.5 years the bridge was out of action. They carried 22.5 million people. They bought ferries from Sydney, Hong Kong, other parts of Tasmania, and quite a few new ones built locally. I worked for a company in those days called the Sullivan Co. Ferry Company. They were private operators at the time. They had 4 conventional ferries operating across the river, each with a capacity of around 300 persons. Fully licensed ferries, in fact the only licensed ferries in Australia, get a beer on your way to work. Used to average 75 18-gallon kegs of beer a week, top hotel in Hobart. And on the way home, leaving the workers and having drinking competitions the day before the breathalyzer course. And the record was 18 10-ounce beers in 15 minutes, held by a plumber. Had a pretty good drainage system. The divorce rate on the eastern shore went up 12.5% above the national average, probably because half the husbands would roll home about 10:30 of an evening and tell their wives the ferry broke down midstream. point coming out the bay is called Sheoak Point, favourite picnic spot for the people of Bellreeve in the early days. Up ahead of the bay is the Eastland Shopping Complex. We have the Bellreeve Yacht Club and Marina. Tasmania has the highest boat ownership of any state of Australia. 1 in 17 Tasmanians own a boat. Before the bridges, everything went through Bellreeve to the east coast of Tasmania, the Tasman Peninsula and the Richmond area. There was a railway line ran from Bellreeve to Sorell. They tell me the train was so slow you could hop off, pick the wildflowers and hop back on again. And a convict compound on the wharf where they transport the convicts from here to Port Dalrymple, now Launceston. Tasmania received the largest number of convicts of any state of Australia between 1803 and 1852. The British pumped 73,000 convicts into Van Diemen's Land. In 1852 received self-government from New South Wales. The locals said no more. In 1856 they changed the name from Van Diemen's Land to Tasmania, get rid of our shameful past. Also changed the name of Port Arthur to Carnarvon. It didn't stick. 21% of Australians are convict descent. The old hotel on the pier is the Waterfront Hotel, built in 1872. Lights over the back there, the Bellreeve Cricket Ground, or the Bloods Arenas they call it these days, where they play the international cricket match in Hobart. Picturesque spot for Cricket Ground Bellreeve. North Melbourne play 4 games there each season. And the Tasmanian government got themselves a bit of trouble. They signed a contract with the AFL for a Tasmanian team on proviso. We built a new stadium costing $715 million. 2 government members weren't happy about that and became independents, which left the government in minority. After battling on for quite a few months, they called an election. We're now worse off. We now have more independents to deal with. And the AFL said no matter who's in power, if you don't build the stadium, you can't have a Tasmanian team. We already have 160,000 members for the Tasmanian team, which is the highest of any AFL team in Australia. Anyway, interesting times ahead, whether the government survives and whether we build a stadium or not, and whether we have a team, we'll have to wait and see. This is Victoria Esplanade, and that lovely Federation place there called the Moorings. 1904 was built for Owen Tinnings. Our Graham White place on the corner here, built by Captain Harry O'May in 1907, identically planned to the white one next door, built by his brother Captain George O'May. The building on the shore here is the O'May Memorial Regatta Pavilion, no longer used. Big sandstone place coming up, built by the father Captain Robert O'May in 1892. His father arrived from Scotland on a vessel called the Indian Queen in 1856. They were coal miners. The father got a land grant up at the bay, 3-storey house, white picket fence, beach out the back. Must have been heaven after coal mines of Scotland, which they converted to a general store, and the sons could see the need for reliable ferry service to Hobart. In those days, you rode across by convicts, quite often drunk, rock ballasted the boat sails and tied the sails off. Squalls would come through, boats would capsize, and you would drown. They started rowing people across in 1863, then convinced the local dock to lend them some money to buy their first steamer, fish up a fleet of 7 steamers and a car ferry, put out of business by the state government of Tasmania over the floating bridge. The government put a toll on the bridge, didn't want the opposition, acquired their ferry service by force. The family had to take the government to court to get value for their business. tree on the pointy of the head shaped like a wave hitting the shore. In 1872, the Russian Navy came into the port of Hobart on a goodwill visit. But whilst they were here, the admiral and all the longboats over the side, they chartered and sounded the harbour. This really frightened the locals up on the point. They built themselves a fort with 10,500 pounds, boat right round the outside, 2 8-inch cannons, 2 6-inch cannons, machine gun emplacement, and montages out into the boats where the riflemen were based. The fort was never used, simply because the Russians, they never returned. In fact, any time they fired the cannons in a practice round, they knocked out a flagpole in Hobart and were allowed to play with the guns anymore. They built ports in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide for the same reason. Port Denison, just near the Opera House in Sydney, and Port Island in Port Phillip Bay were built for the impending Russian invasion. Used to be one of my favourite haunts when I was a young fellow. We used to catch those lovely big green bell frogs in the moats, which unfortunately you don't seem to see anymore. And we used to take the lead from the iron fittings, melt them down to our kiwi nugget tins, bolt them onto scalp belts to dive the great fish off the bluff. Now right down the bottom of the river there, 12 miles down, is the landmass of Bruny Island. Bruny Island was visited by Captain James Cook in 1777 on his third voyage. The voyage he lost his life in the Sandwich Islands, now known as Hawaii, where Cook was killed and brought up in the pots by the natives to remove his bones, which they gave back to the English wrapped in black feathers. The sailing master was William Bligh. He took the fleet back to England. Bligh returned himself in 1788 with the Bounty and planted the first apple trees and potatoes in Tasmania at Adventure Bay on Bruny Island. From there, he proceeded to Tahiti. Bligh wanted to chart the top end of Australia. He had to wait for the right weather conditions. He stayed in Tahiti for 6 months. Big mistake. Imagine the lifestyle the English sailors were experiencing in Tahiti. Fantastic food, great climate, lovely fresh clean water, and of course the gorgeous Tahitian ladies. So the Mutiny of the Valley took place under the command of Fletcher Christian when they arrested Bligh, dropped him over the side in a longboat. 18 loyal men sailed all the way to Timor, 2,700 nautical miles, touched land once, stoned by the natives, quite a marvellous navigational feat. Bligh was then sent out by the British government to take up the governorship of New South Wales, sort out the rum corps in Sydney, and John MacArthur, the Merino man, all very corrupt, were making a fortune selling rum on the black market, so Bligh punished them by taking their rum rations away, caused the rum rebellion in 1809 under the command of Colonel Johnson. They arrested Bligh and kicked him out. He came down here to blockade the port of Hobart with his ship called the Porpoise, and Bligh had to remain in Hobart for nearly 2 years until Governor Macquarie arrived from England to take up the governorship of New South Wales. Now the landmass right in the middle of the river there is called South Arm. In 1825, William Gillibrand was told he could have all the land he could fence in a day. South Arm is joined by a narrow neck with beaches either side, so Gillibrand with his convict labour whipped the fence straight across that narrow neck. Thus he was granted South Arm. His son Joseph T. Gillibrand was the first Attorney General in Tasmania. He went across in 1835 with John Batman from Launceston to Port Phillip Bay, negotiated 6,000 acres with trinkets and beads around Port Phillip Bay from the Aboriginals, where Melbourne now stands speared to death in the Barwon River. 1836, still family members have land on South Arm to this day. Bit of a hump over there between the two landmasses is Betsy Island. In 1804, when Lieutenant Collins came in to settle Hobart town, he allowed 2 convicts live in that island, and they'd send up smoke signals warning of any approaching shipping. Then leased to Captain King, who introduced rabbits into Van Diemen's Land. First of all, they had enough common sense to contain them on that island. They used to make hats from sealskin and rabbit fur. Sadly introduced the rabbits to Victoria from Betsy Island. Now the barren hills over here on our left are what they call Druthi. The southernmost point of Druthi is Trywork Point, site to the first whaling station in Australia, 1806. When the Europeans first came in here, they were absolutely amazed at the amount of whales living and breeding in the river. In fact, they said the whales were so thick in the river, you walk across the backs of whales without getting your feet wet. They made so much noise of a night, nobody could sleep. Hobart was the biggest whaling port in the British Empire, the second biggest whaling port in the world. Between 1806 and 1845, sadly, they wiped out 35,000 whales in here. The oil was used for the Industrial Revolution in Great Britain to all the machinery and light the street lamps, and the last whaling out of Australia, 1978, from Albany, Western Australia. You may wonder why the hills are so barren. They cut all the trees down for firewood to boil the blubber. Probably the first clear filling in Australia. After the shore whaling had finished, went out in the Southern Oceans, porting boats based in Hobart. French, Americans, English whaled out of here. Huge boat building repair industry. In those days, a shortage of coins in the colonies. The main currency used in Hobart, the American dollar.